Welcome to the Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life podcast. I'm your host, Nadia Dela Cruz, founder of the Wayne Dyer Wisdom Community on Facebook and angeltarot.org. Now, this podcast would not be possible without support from loyal fans like you. So I want to give a big thank you to everyone who supports me on Patreon. You can find the link for that and more details about this podcast at nadiadelacruz.com. Now, my guest today knows firsthand the impact that a spiritual connection can have. Through navigating a series of personal tragedies early on in her life, she discovered and strengthened this connection to the healing energy of spirit. She's currently a Reiki master and the author of 3 books, including Innerspace, A Personal Journey to Help and Heal. Tracey Pagana, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Nadia.
That is okay.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Thank you for having me, Nadia. And I do love your name, Nadia Dela Cruz. It's a beautiful name.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Now, we have sort of been circling each other's orbit for a couple of years. I know that you've been in the group and we had some messages that got lost, but we finally got connected and I'm so glad that we did. And as we spoke about earlier, it does feel like divine timing. So I'm excited to dive into your story and to hear a little bit about your journey. I know you're a huge fan of Wayne Dyer, just like I am, feeling his presence in your life, but you actually discovered a spiritual connection when you were quite young, probably too young to even understand what was happening. So why don't we start at the beginning and maybe you can tell us about the first time you felt that nudge of messages from spirit.
Okay, thank you. Well, I was around 10, and the little neighbor boy that lived across from us in a little farm, there was a tobacco field, and there was an irrigation pond in the tobacco field, and he drowned in the pond, and I was frantic because when his brother came screaming for us to come and find his brother, I already knew he was gone. I could feel him gone. And that was my first experience of knowing that something inside of me was bigger than I understood. And also knowing that what they were going to pull out, I already saw. So it was really frightening. It was very scary because he didn't look well when they pulled him out, but I'd already seen that. And that kind of awakened me into a place I didn't know if I wanted to go because it was scary. But it just continued on as I grew older. My sister had an emergency appendicitis attack, and I was frantic, and I was trying to tell my parents there's something really wrong with her, and they were trying to calm me down. And I knew that she had to go to the hospital immediately, or something would have happened that wouldn't have been good for her. And that just continued on. So it just sort of evolved kind of that way.
And it's hard when you're a kid too, because it's so easy to get dismissed and oh, you're just a little kid. It reminds me of the story of Wayne Dyer trying to save his brother. Do you remember that story when they were kids and his brother got swept away in the river and he ran to, it was like the boathouse or something, and was like, help, 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 my brother. And he's like, I don't know how I found the strength to insist that they needed to do this, but they did. They pulled him out of the water, and I think he was unconscious too. They brought him back to life, but that makes me think about what it's like to be a little kid, especially when you're impacted by spirit. And
Yes.
who's going to believe you, right? Oh, the kid's just acting up. But, and like you said, that scary image of seeing the boy, I mean, that's not something you want to see. So did you understand what was happening then, or was it only sort of later on?
I didn't understand what was happening then. I knew it was something different. I always knew that I knew things, but as you say, you don't really want to talk about them because, first of all, people think you're not right, and secondly, it's scary when you confirm that to somebody else, it actually confirms it deeper to you. So
Makes it more
if you
real.
deny it even
Yeah.
to yourself, right, it makes it more real.
Hmm.
So if you deny it, you don't have to be accountable for it.
Mm.
So I didn't know until I think when I really, really knew Nadia was when I lost my boyfriend who died in a car accident. I love this guy. He was like my high school like crush. So I kind of stalked him a little bit for a few years. I was really shy and I always kind of thought he was really cute. He wasn't available, but he did notice me in my last year of high school, and we had a very passionate, very short 7 months together.
Mm.
And I just loved him, and I always knew, and he loved me too. It was just we had this beautiful connection. But I always had a feeling I wasn't going to be able to keep him. And what 17-year-old says, please, don't ever die until, if you ever get in an accident, I don't want you to ever die until you see me. Like, really, who says that? So I almost had a premonition that what was going to happen happened. And for a long time, I held myself guilty because he was coming to see me. He was going on a school trip and he was coming to see me the night before because I had a St. Christopher's medal for him. And that's when he got in the accident and the chase and everything that happened to him. And then he died 3 days later. But true to form, he did wait for me to come to his bedside to see him. And I know that that connection was there. Even though he couldn't speak to me, he was with me. And the night that he died, he came to see me and he visited my body. And
Oh.
he was just, his soul was and I was very young still. It took me a lot of years to understand all that pain and that disconnect. I made a lot of bad choices because of that. But in full circle, it was really a beautiful gift for me when I was 18 years old, 19 years old.
Sounds like
Yeah.
he was kind of this shooting star, like bright and beautiful but brief.
Yeah.
And I know Wayne
Yes.
Dyer has said that nobody dies before it's their time. And that's really
Yes.
hard for us to understand when somebody dies young because it feels like they got cheated out of life or they were taken too soon. But maybe, just maybe, they knew what they were coming here for.
Hmm.
Maybe they got exactly what they came for. And I used to think that death is the worst thing that can happen. But after my dad died, the strangest thing happened that like these symbols of death, like skulls and skeletons that I'd always been very adverse to. Like a lot of people in the spiritual community, they're like, "Ooh, look at my beautiful crystal skull," and I'm like, uh, not so much for me. And then when I lost my dad, like my feelings around all of that changed. And it occurred to me in a really sort of visceral, in my body kind of way that maybe death isn't the worst thing. And in fact, if we understood it, we might be celebrating for that person moving on. And that if we were to live forever here, which is not what was intended, which is not what we came for here, maybe that would be the real tragedy. But it takes a long time for us to process the
Hmm.
grief of what certainly looks like loss. I'm
Hmm.
not sure if it is loss, but it certainly looks like loss when that person isn't here with us anymore. So what was that like when he visited you in spirit after he died?
It was beautiful. I still to this day remember what it felt like. And of course, it left you wanting more. I always say, what is the worst thing that can happen to a person? I say this now. And I say this to everybody that comes into my space. Death is really the worst thing I think that could happen to a person, but I always say then you get to go eat candy with God. So if you don't have any fear around that, but I didn't feel that way. I was very afraid. I remember going to bed and I remember feeling really scared, really afraid, just really in shock. And I remember a tingling just coming into my body, like just this presence just coming into my body and filling my whole body with this love that I don't have any words for the love, but it was just like this insurmountable love. And then I literally felt like he tapped me on the top of my head and I just went right to sleep, and I slept for like 12 hours.
Wow.
And I don't remember dreaming. I don't remember any of that, but I do know that he was there for
Wow.
sure.
That's
Mm-hmm.
a beautiful gift. And thank you for sharing
Mm-hmm.
that with us.
Well, thank you
Um,
for asking.
This brings me to Anita Morjani. I know you're a big fan of
Mm,
her, and I am as well. And Wayne Dyer, found some little story that she had on the internet that was written by
mm-hmm.
Anita M. And he told his assistant, like, you need to find this person. And they finally found her, and he brought her out to the world and encouraged her to write
Yeah.
her first book, Dying to Be Me. And that
Mm-hmm.
book for me really changed my understanding of death. And like
Mm-hmm.
the way that she spoke about that space is kind of like what you were describing of the love that you felt in your body and like just
Yeah.
being in this sea of love. And she keeps saying that, on the other side is only love, only love,
Mm-hmm.
only love. What kind of impact did Anita have on you?
Well, when I did read Anita's book, excuse me, I fell in love with her. I fell in love with her bright light, her innocence, her beauty, her suffering, her coming back from that, her not wanting to come back from that. And I guess in some ways I could relate because I've had a lot of close encounters to death myself, never to that experience, but to actually go there and feel all that and then have to come back to that. She was really brave. So I actually literally wrote her an email because she touched me so deeply. And I never believe that not anything's impossible. I don't think that way. I'm very naive and very
Good for
sheltered in a
you.
good way. Thank you. Excuse me. So I wrote her an email, and I always want to, I kind of say things like this. I believe that when you ask for something and you're genuine with the asking, you have to have that faith that biblically when the woman was touching the robe of Jesus, she just needed to touch his robe and she knew she would be healed. I
Mhm.
had that kind of feeling with Anita. I felt like if I just reached out to her, and what I said to her was absolutely that I'm a fan. I love you. I think you're brilliant and beautiful and sweet. But I do have a question, and I want to ask you a question. And I'm wondering if you would join me spiritually in every session that I do from here on. Would you join me, connect with me spiritually? And she said yes. So I feel lots of spirit in the room when I work with spirit, but Anita's there as well because she said yes. And I've never doubted for 1 second she's not in my room with me.
Mhm.
I just know she's there. She's there for all of us in a way. I feel that she's there for all of us in a way, the same way that Dr. Wayne is. And I always say Dr. Wayne out of respect, but actually he's kind of like my spiritual husband. But anyway, we'll talk about that in a minute. Um, I just believe that all of us are attainable, both physically and spiritually, and you just have to have an open heart, and you just have to have that real faith that we're all connected to this energy. And so when Anita said yes to me, she literally answered my email and said yes. I wasn't starstruck, I was spirit struck, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
I mean, she's just beautiful, and I love her.
Yeah, she is a beautiful soul, and she brings so much authenticity and humility. And I can only imagine how life changing it was for her. It's almost hard to imagine the Anita before she.
Yeah,
So, for those who don't know the story, she had end stage cancer. She had tumors the size of baseballs
huge.
in
Yeah.
her throat and under her arms. And I think she was down to like 80 pounds. And they brought her to the hospital and they said, this is it. She's going to die now. And she went into a coma, but she could see and hear everything that was going on, not just in the room around her, but like she could see her brother getting on the plane to come and visit her and all these things. It's amazing. For anyone who hasn't seen it,
Hmm.
check out Dying to Be Me by Nita Morjani. But
Hmm.
but yeah, she talks about how before all of this, like she lived with a lot of fear, and that
Hmm.
she she wanted to please other people and she didn't feel like she was living her life authentically. And she met her father in spirit who had crossed over it. She didn't have the best relationship with, but he connected with her in such a loving way and said, go back and live your life fearlessly. And I feel like she's spending all this time. That's her mission. She's spreading this message and practicing what she's teaching is to live without fear. So yeah, I'm grateful for her presence and her influence and her continued teachings. Her and her husband Danny, they're so cute.
Yeah, he's adorable. Yes.
All right, so
It's interesting because she calls him Boo, and my best friend of 35 years I call Boo.
really,
So it's just really, she's so sweet with him, and yeah, she's adorable.
she is. We love her.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Wayne, for
Mm-hmm.
finding her.
Yes.
I'm sure it wasn't just Wayne, but it was time for her message to
Uh,
reach us, and what a
yes.
beautiful time. Yeah, near-death experiences are incredible. There's so many stories I think to
Mm-hmm.
mill from all of that can help us maybe understand our true selves a little bit better,
Mm-hmm.
and not just what happens when we die, but like who we really are in this life.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about some of these early experiences that you had as a child and as a teenager when you lost your boyfriend. But it sounds like these things were still a little bit new. So when did you really start to develop your connection with spiritual guidance?
Well, I went through a very trying, hard time in my life where I was pretty much, um, I felt that I was abandoned by pretty much everyone. And I don't really want to get into the details because they're very, very personal. But I do remember there was a point in my life when I remember reaching out to God and saying, and feeling, not just saying, but feeling that He never left me, and that became my spiritual family. At that moment, it was like a light switch. It was like an epiphany. It was like I was dead to this world in some ways. And I reached up and I often say this, God never disconnected from me, but
Mm-hmm.
I disconnected from God. And I reached up and I reconnected to source, and it just never stopped. It just my spiritual family became bigger than my earth family for quite
Mm-hmm.
some time. And so a lot of people passed away that I felt them pass. I felt them with me. I felt um it's just different there. It's not judgmental. It's consistent and constant. So everything that left me here and let me down here, I reached up and grabbed the ring for the other energy that pulled me through everything I've been through. And it's just taught me
Mm-hmm.
how to love beyond love. It's taught me how to forgive every single thing in my life that is unforgivable. And it's allowed me to have the freedom to and the education to love that differently.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
there was
I
this
want to
moment
say
in my
that
life. Go ahead.
so I want to say that I totally respect your privacy and you don't need to share the details of everything that you've been through. I wouldn't expect anybody to do that. But correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like um, when you needed your family and you were going through some difficulties, you felt like they weren't there for you in the way that you needed. And that rather than that being sort of your downfall, you actually connected with a spiritual support that
Mm-hmm.
I really believe that I really believe that we all have that kind of support. And I like to say we have
Yeah.
angels, guides, and ancestors that surround us. And that's not just
Yeah.
some, hokey little new age saying. Like I really believe that
Yeah.
those energies are here and accessible and that they want to support us and they want to help us. And so
Yeah.
I know that you've experienced some darkness and some pain, and sometimes feeling alone is one of the worst things that we can feel. But I gotta say that the silver lining, which is more than a silver lining, it is more like a gift. In the long run, in hindsight, it can be a gift because you chose to take that experience
Yeah.
and deepen your connection with spirit, and it's never left you.
Never. It's just gotten bigger. So, and it allows me, it allows me to have both worlds at the same time without giving one of the other worlds up. So it allows me to be
That's the
Tracy when I
best.
need to be Tracy. It's like when I always say, Nadia, I always say this, I'm a gazillionaire in the soul world. Literally.
Mm.
And
Yep.
I am like
You
a
hit the
gazillionaire.
jackpot, darling.
I did. And I know I have this like Mona Lisa secret. Like I always say they're precious pearls, and I have this Lisa secret that I can just rise above that because I have that support system that's never let me down. It's
Hmm.
consistent and constant.
That's beautiful. I studied
Hmm.
with Kyle Gray. He's another Hay House author, and he talks a lot about angels. And his teachings really
Hmm.
helped me to connect more deeply with that kind of energy, which I know so many people feel or they believe in, but they sometimes they doubt their own connection or like, oh, an angel's not gonna
Hmm.
communicate with me. Like, why would they do that? But I disagree. I think angels are always with us. So when did you first
I agree
discover
too.
that you had the ability to heal?
Well, interesting enough, again, in my naivety, I have to say that because I'm so plugged into that educational system or that support system, I don't
Mm-hmm.
look for other outside support a lot. I've kind of lived my own kind of life and I'm plugged right into that. So it's not that I disrespect anybody else. I just don't feel that need to get that information anywhere because I'm constantly fed what I need. And so I actually literally get this needs to happen with this person or that needs to happen with that person or I literally, when someone comes for a session, I literally, Tracy steps out and spirit steps in. And so
Mm.
I think it just
Hollow bone.
gradually grew hollow bone. And I think it just gradually grew into that when I actually said, when I stopped saying no to Source and just said, I signed up, whatever you want, whatever you need, whoever you bring. In fact, I didn't even want to write one book, and that's another whole story. But, when I say no to Source, Source puts me in a room in a corner and I get a little, like I get in a little trouble. So I don't do that anymore. Um, I just say yes all the time, and I don't even want for 1 second doubt it. Because
Mm-hmm.
most of the time it's not of me anyway. Most of the time it's
Mm-hmm.
me as a channel and a facilitator for someone that's hungry for source or someone that needs a message or someone that, it's really not about me. It's about someone that's coming. So,
I think the secret to connecting with this awareness of spirituality is that it's not about controlling it, it's about allowing it. Just like what you said, that
absolutely.
we don't have to direct spirit. Spirit knows what's better for us and those around us
Hmm.
more than we
Hmm.
do. We just need to say yes, open to it, and let it into our lives, and then like wait for the miracles to happen. Like
Exactly.
Wayne used to say, I am realistic. I expect miracles, and what a beautiful way to live. And I think if we all lived that way, even just a little bit, even just some of the time, it would take away so much fear if we just had this trust
Absolutely.
that there's something bigger working through us, working for us. We say yes, we allow it, and we look for magic to manifest in ways that are even unexpected.
Hmm. I love this is so passionate and I love your passion. I get to witness miracles all, sometimes more than once a day. And in the witnessing of that miracle, when that healer is claiming the healing within them and you get to facilitate that, it is like, again, it's like winning a lottery with God. It's like you get to see someone heal and um you it's more than humbling. It just changes your life. It just and then I have to leave that space and come back into Tracy and then come back and like clean a washroom at the company or enter some data or do something like
Right.
that.
Something very
So
human.
you're pulled, because you need to be humbled in that because it's really not about me, but I get to experience the miracles around that. And I say yes to all of that. It's a
So
calling.
are people really healing themselves? Because it's interesting how you phrase that. Is it that they need to be open to it and then they are the ones allowing the healing to take place?
Well, as I've evolved in my healing practice, um, I realize that, yes, I realize that when they come, there's a need for them. And so when
Mm-hmm.
they come, I always set the room up. It's sacred space. So I do a ritual and it's consistent. It's the same one. I invite the same people. And then I sit back and I just wait for them to basically say what it is they're needing or they're wanting. And it just pours out of me. It's the same when I write. It's not of me. So I Tracy steps out and spirit steps in, and they're having a conversation with spirit, really. And
Mm-hmm.
and the whole thing about it is it's I can't be anything but truth. So sometimes it's not pretty and sometimes it's painful and sometimes I cry with them and sometimes they get angry and sometimes but there's always a healing and there's always a releasing because that's why they're there. So
So
I tend
you're the facilitator
and the channeler. So
and
I
the
do
channeler.
that
Yes.
facilitate and the channeling. Sometimes it's Tracy, but then I find myself being opinionated with that. And so I pull back out, and then it's again about spirit. So I'm pretty good with those kind of boundaries. I've been working a long time on them,
Yeah.
and I've been very fortunate to do the degree of work I get to do. It's
That's a
amazing.
real practice. Now, a lot of people who do work with energy feel
hmm
really tired and drained and need to kind of like
hmm
schedule in time to recuperate afterwards. Is that true for you as well?
It was until about 2 years ago because when I started to stop taking it personally, and I started to filter through because I am just the filter. And no matter how devastating the things are that I'm hearing or how painful they are,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just the witness to that.
Yeah.
Do I feel it with them? Absolutely. But I release as they release. I give it to God because it's not mine. So I never feel anything but exhilarated, no matter how painful the session is. I never feel anything but honored, and I never feel anything but the miracle that they've had in their own healing. Sometimes if it's really traumatic and there's people that are having after stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I facilitate that for them too, but I always separate it from myself because it's not mine.
Yeah.
It belongs to them and God. Belongs to them. It's their healing.
It's not yours to carry, and I think
No.
that's really a lesson that we all could use. whether whether anyone listening, if you work as a healer or not, I think it's important that we let people have their own journeys and trust that
hmm
there is benefit even in the moments of suffering, and that when people come to us for assistance, we help them as we can and we offer love, but we also kind of let the bigger forces
Yeah.
work for the highest good of all.
Yeah.
So, I know that you studied as a Reiki master, and there's a lot of
hmm
people who have got interested in Reiki over the past number of years. But can you tell us a little bit about what it is and how that works?
I would love to. My first experience of Reiki was many, many years ago. I was at a silent retreat and I was at a 7 day silent retreat, believe it or not. I couldn't speak for 7 days. It was excruciating. But there was a woman there that glowed. She just glowed. And I was so attracted to her. So after the meditation was over, which was amazing, I loved it. I actually felt, oh, it was just amazing. I loved it. It was hard, but it was amazing. Um, I walked up to her and I said, I'm really sorry if I'm disrespectful, but there's something about you that glows. And she smiled and she said, that's the Reiki. And that's the first time I'd ever heard that. So this was like probably 20 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even longer. Yeah, I think maybe even longer, probably more like 25 years ago. Anyway, I was like driven to understand what chakras were and to find books and to see the colors of the wheels that the energy was. And so I actually got a book on chakras first
Mm-hmm.
and studied that. And then I got a book on Reiki and I just was really pulled to it. I was drawn to it. So one of a very, very good friend of mine who just recently passed away, who's also in session with me all the time, she bought me my first degree in Reiki as a gift. And I stayed with the same woman for 11 years. It took me 11 years to get my Reiki master because I just wanted to be, I wanted to know it. It took me a whole year to place all the placements on me and to feel it and to understand it because I knew it was really reverent. And every time I was attuned to a degree in Reiki, it was just this magical moment for me. And it's just very sacred. And Reiki is healing energy, and you become the conduit. So it's source, it's God, but your body becomes the conduit for source to work through your body, through your chakras, and it comes out your hands in a generated heat. So if I were to touch my hands right now to touch them, they'd be cold. But if I were to put my hands on you, you would probably feel like a furnace coming inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's loving, healing energy. And again, it's source, so it has its own mind. It goes to the highest good of your highest being. So I'm just the wheel and the facilitator again for the Reiki to come through in a session.
There's a wisdom in that energy that you
Mm.
bring it and it goes where it needs to. That's beautiful. Thank you for that wonderful description of Reiki. Now, there was two questions that popped up for me. One was, do you think it's important to detach from outcome when you're healing someone? Or are you really holding that vision tight of how you want it to be? Or is there room for both?
I think that the outcome is none of my
Hmm.
business, to be really honest, because that again is sort of ego based. So if I'm holding on to an outcome for someone and it doesn't turn out to be whatever that outcome is, I may be either oversaturated with joy for that or really depressed for that. So whatever happens to another human being or whatever another human being might feel or think about me is literally none of my business. I will just send love to the outcome because detaching from whatever that journey is after the initial healing that happens for that person, it's very, very personal for
Yeah.
them. So it's not that I don't wish them anything but love and good, but I just feel like whatever that outcome is, it's literally really none of my business. It's their journey.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, when they allow me in there, so I've really come to understand this, Nadia. Unless someone asks me a question, I'm usually pretty silent now if I'm in a conversation with somebody because people just want to be heard mostly. They want to share what they want to share. And unless they ask me a question, they don't really want to know. So if someone reaches out to me after a session and says, "This happened to me, what can I do with this?" I'm all in.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I have to detach because then there's somebody else right around the corner. And if I don't detach from that one, I might not know the other one that's coming.
Yeah. Cleanse the palate, prepare for the next one. Yeah, moving on. Now, can you use Reiki on objects?
Oh, well, objects? Everything is energy.
Right.
So I suppose so, like a picture. If you mean a picture or somebody's stuffed animal or a blanket from a baby, absolutely.
Because like what I was thinking is sometimes I will peruse Etsy as one does, and there's beautiful handcrafted items, and sometimes I would see people selling, like, oh, these homemade candles, for example, are infused with Reiki, and I wonder
hmm
what your take is on that, and like what's the benefit?
Well, my take on anything spiritually given or driven, and that comes from a clean heart and connection from soul. And I think I say this more now because I've done so much more virtual sessions that God is present just as much in the virtual session as he is in a one-on-one session.
Yeah.
So I've expanded that way that if someone has said they've held with a candle and they've held space in that candle and they've put a great big loving ball of Reiki in there,
Hmm.
I'm going to say, buy the candle. Absolutely, because it's a loving, energetic gesture of love and kindness that someone took time to put love around that for someone else to enjoy that. So I would say yes to that.
I think of it sort of like an intention that you place in something, or how, like,
Mhm.
our grandmothers would say, like, the secret ingredient in this dinner is love. And that, I don't think that was just words. Like, they really felt like it's going to impact your life and your body in a positive way because they're putting their love in while they're cooking this food for you.
I love that. And it reminds me that someone told me last week, very, very kindly and gently, words are spells. And they literally
Mm.
are.
Words
When
have
we come
power.
from,
Yeah.
right, they are powerful. And so I always say your most powerful tool in all of life are your words or your actions, of course, if you can't speak, but they're so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And if you believe what you're saying, others are going to believe that too. It's that energetic power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
Wayne Dyer used to talk about the power of I am, or I am that I am, which is
Mhm.
the name of God.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
probably the biggest influence on the spiritual community in terms of affirmations was Louise Hay, right? Like
Hmm.
that's how sort of the foundation for everything that she did. She had her little blue book. So, do you have affirmations that you do on a regular basis, or maybe even that you offer to clients?
I do, and they change.
Mm-hmm.
So as you grow in spirit, your vocabulary changes.
Mm-hmm.
My vocabulary changed a lot just after this fourth book. Just before you and I met, I just released the fourth book to edit, and I talk a lot about loving patina, earned patina in a person. So, um, and I talk about as you release to source, your real estate within you becomes brand new. You have brand new space, brand new real estate. So I'm using these words that we use, but I'm using them in personal format. Like you become patina, you become new real estate.
Mm-hmm.
You can have all of that. So I do use a lot of affirmations. I say a lot of things, phrases. They change all the time because spirit changes all the time and you grow all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they're important because I think people can relate to real estate,
Mm-hmm.
can relate to a piece of copper out of the ground that might be 500 years old that has a dark patina around it. That's who you are. You are this rich, beautiful human being that has earned the right to be patina.
Yeah, that's a beautiful reminder. You know how a lot of people have gratitude journals? Well, I have
Hmm.
this book it's sort of a prayer book and it's sort of a gratitude journal, but I started doing this thing recently of daily affirmations. And I would write out every sentence begins with I am. And it's like whatever
Mm,
I feel in my heart that I'm moving towards in that day, right? Or instead of feeling like something is deficient, right? Like I'm calling it into being. And I just thought of that when I was talking to you, but I thought that might be like a good suggestion for somebody to try as particularly a morning practice of, get you into that space of connecting to the healing light of the divine, connecting to, it's like if you check in with your body, and I think the body is a conduit for spirit. I know that's how I
absolutely.
receive a lot of my messages and the things that I know.
Hmm.
But if you connect with your body and you go, how am I feeling? What do I need today? And that's such a good barometer for what we need in our
Yeah.
life. But yeah, if you could just write out, let's say 3 I ams in the morning, I am well, I am perfect health.
Hmm.
Um I am surrounded by more wealth than I need.
Yeah.
Like whatever it is, it's these things that make you feel good. And if nothing else, it puts a smile on your face in the morning.
I love that. And I say I'm happy, healthy, and whole
Mm.
most of the time. I am happy, healthy, and whole. But I also say this, and I'm reminded of this because The Shift is one of my favorite movies.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as he sits up and just the way he says it, thank you, thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. Like just three thank yous. And you say them kind of slow and methodical like he did.
Mm-hmm.
It's reverent and it just can start your day. I love that too. I love the I am. Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, you got me to
Hmm.
think of that because it just sort of popped into my head. Now, I love that you took so much time to really process and internalize and work with that healing energy of Reiki. And I wonder because there are so many people that are studying Reiki and so many people that maybe sort of jump on that weekend class or kind of a quick
Hmm.
certification. And like I believe that they're there with the best possible intentions. So I don't mean to knock
Mm-hmm.
that at all. It might be a
Mm-hmm.
fabulous way to sort of learn more about that. But if you are going to do healing work on others, I do think there's a lot of just time and experience that goes into that. But because it is energy work, and sometimes it's hard to kind of put it into words of like how to develop the practice. I wonder from your perspective, what are some of the common mistakes of Reiki that people might make?
Well, I think it's very addictive, okay? Because when you fall in love with spirit, you fall in love. So when you fall in love with Reiki, you fall in love. And there's a bit of a love sickness that goes along with that because you kind of become self-saturated in the Reiki, which is all love. And I think the common mistake might be is to speed that up, is to not take the time to really feel what that feels for you and to really understand it and to really saturate yourself in that. Allow yourself to have some time in which we are all in this big hurry because when you fall in love that quickly, you just want it all at once. And it takes
Mm-hmm.
time to really understand it and to digest it, more so for yourself than anyone else. And if you're going to start a practice with that, you want to you're right, you want to be really careful it's not from ego. And so when you fall in love, that's there's still some ego in there. There's quite a bit of ego in there that's being saturated by all of that, and so there's a little bit of an imbalance. So my suggestion, I love that you all want to do that because I love that everybody is awakening to spirit, and I love that everybody's
Mm-hmm.
hungry. So I understand the hunger for this, but just like love yourself enough to take some time to really feel what that feels like and to really understand it. Take some time.
Yeah. And then you talked about how you used to feel really drained by it, but now you don't. Do
Hmm.
you have any advice for people, maybe not just with Reiki, but with all spiritual work?
So when I was really drained by it, and I literally was, I literally could feel like my heart was going to have a heart attack because it was so heavy physically. And I realized that if I didn't give that over to God and become the filter and release it and step out of the way, most people think when they step out of the way, they're being disrespectful or they're not holding
Mm-hmm.
space for somebody or they're obligated because they started this journey with somebody. They're obligated as the mature one or the one that's facilitating to take over that. And it's literally about stepping out of the way. You literally actually completely cut that off and step out of the way and you release it. And when you release it, you literally feel it going. And you're not being disrespectful. You're actually loving them in a way that you didn't even understand you were loving them in by letting them go, by releasing them to that journey.
Mm-hmm.
It's never about us. We get very emotionally involved when we're involved with somebody else's pain, and we
Yeah.
have to literally separate from that.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm just sort of picturing that. I feel like I want to sit in that for a while. Just that. I mean, it's not exactly detachment, but it's more like the ultimate allowing, where you almost
Hmm.
dissolve into the ethers of spirit
Hmm.
without all these attachments we have to how things should be going, or that, especially as a healer, like, oh, I'm supposed to be in charge here and I need to be
Hmm.
authoritative and professional, and like I'm going to heal you,
Hmm.
which is maybe a it's maybe that's
Hmm.
an ego thing, right?
Hmm.
Like this need to heal. Ram Dass was one of my big influences, and he obviously studied psychology. He was a Harvard professor, and you know, he would talk about this sort of the therapist needed to have patience,
Hmm.
and if they didn't have patience, then who were they? So even when we get into spiritual work, I think it's really easy to be guided by ego without realizing that that's what's happening.
It's a big release. So it's a release for you're releasing for them and you're releasing for you. Interesting you talk about education because I often say this. I even write about this a lot. I didn't do well in worldly school. I really didn't. And that's why it took me so long to even write a book. But I went to soul school. And I talk about that all the time. Like I'm kind of in university and soul school. I'm a little bit not a university professor by any means, but I am in that level of soul school education where that's what taught me my life lessons. It was all soul school, really more than it was literally earth. So, not that I don't have to have that education. I'm glad I went back and got education and continued, my studies and did what I did here. But I just feel like there's so much that we don't know that's teaching us from source that I always say that I come from that kind of soul school. And when someone's not advancing where I think they should, I kind of sweetly say, well, they're still in grade 2 soul school or they're still in grade 4 soul school. We're all learning at different levels spiritually and humanly and these combinations and we're trying to balance them both. So
Hmm.
if does that make
Yeah.
sense? I mean, that's kind of what I talk.
Everybody's right where they need to be, and having that kind of faith can take you
Absolutely.
really far. Now, when
Hmm.
you work in service to others to offer healing, and I know you've told me that sometimes you will be like walking down the street and be drawn to
Hmm.
somebody who needs you. But when
Yeah.
you're offering this to others, does it provide a healing energy for you as well?
This is my favorite line. When you heal, I heal, and the world heals around us. It's never one-sided. We all heal whenever you're involved in any type of healing.
Wow,
It's a win-win, win-win-win.
we're all in it together. Now, Wayne Dyer brought us together, and I know
He
that
did.
he's near and dear to your heart. Can you tell us a little bit about, what is it that you love about Wayne Dyer? What kind of
Mhm.
impact did he have on your journey?
Wayne Dyer's voice is it's you're in a trance as soon as he even says one word. You're just hit the power within him, the assurance, the faith, the humor, the he's just a beautiful person. He was a beautiful person. And I fell in love with him a long time ago. If I was in a bad mood, I just had to listen to one of his meditations or, read one of his books because he didn't just he was what he said. And he didn't make any bones about that. He never made any bones about the reality of who he was as a person. So he was very charismatic. And he saved me a lot of times. He saved me a lot of times in his readings and his writings. And I loved Hay House. I was addicted to it. So I would watch a lot of him. And because he was so charismatic and he was so honest, I fell in love with him, like all of us did. And when he passed away, I was sad. And I remember sitting at my desk at work. I had a lot of freedom at that desk. And I remember saying, okay, so here's the thing, Dr. Wayne. I always called him Dr. Wayne. You're gone now. And so you're accessible to me. So would you please marry me in spirit and be my spiritual husband? Because you're more accessible to me now in spirit than you were in flesh, even though I was always connected. And I heard him say, yes, of course. And so he's sort of been with me like a comfortable marriage for all those years. And everywhere I go, he's with me. And everywhere I talk, he's with me. And whenever I'm speaking to someone like you, Nadia, who is so spiritually, you're my family. So we're talking about we're speaking the same language. It just enhances all that.
Hmm.
He's just more here. And so I actually wrote about him in one of my books, and that's actually how Naughty and I actually connected because I loved him so much. I wanted to honor him
Hmm.
and tell everybody how much I loved him
Yeah, me
because
too.
I love him. Yeah, we love him, right?
This is like an homage to my greatest teacher, and I'm so passionate about so many of the things that he was passionate about, and
Mhm.
he was the one who just really brought these concepts to my doorstep and made them so accessible and so easy to understand and apply to my life. And
Hmm.
I think I'll be talking about Wayne, and I'll be talking about spirituality for the rest of my life, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't have it any other way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a calling. We're called to do this, but we're also community.
Yeah.
So he's our community. He's our mentor, our teacher. I feel like, literally that he married me in spirit,
Hmm.
like in the sense of being married to me is the work, because I asked him if he would do that. And you did the same. You love him the same way. We love him the same way.
Yeah, he
Common,
definitely he definitely feels like family. Now, do you feel like he gives you guidance, or does he suggest things for you to say? Like, how does that work for you?
I just feel like, when you're in a marriage that's really comfortable,
Hmm.
like I'm in a marriage that's very comfortable. A lot of times I sit with my husband and we don't even speak, but
Hmm.
it's like a comfortable pair of worn out moccasins. So I almost feel like he's that kind of presence for me. He doesn't, I think if I was doing something wrong, I'm sure if I was doing something wrong, and I hear him when it's of ego, Tracy, that's ego, or you need to actually ask for forgiveness for that.
Hmm.
I'll hear those kind of things like my spouse would say to me, that was really wrong, or you might want to think about that, or maybe you might want to watch your potty mouth here, or whatever. I kind of hear him that way when I'm being not a naughty, when I'm being a bit naughty. But when I'm working in spiritual work with him, I sort of work the same way he did. I kind of go into a trance,
Yeah.
and he's with me in that. Just like his mentors and guides were with him, he's that for me.
Hmm. Yeah, to feel that loving presence, and sometimes that's all we need. It's not always words. Um, yeah, I feel that too,
Mhm,
and I'm
mhm,
grateful that even when people cross over, that they're still around, they still witness our lives, and sometimes they participate in our lives. And I really feel like all the things that he was passionate about, that he was excited about when he was here in his human body, like he was
mhm,
really on to something, because he's still excited, and he's still,
mhm,
has that mission, I think, and loves sort of connecting with people who are um, not just who maybe read his books or listened to his talks, but people who are passionate about this kind of spiritual awakening, and this climbing that ladder to freedom, that space of becoming, like, dying while you're still alive, right? Becoming aware to the fullness of who we really are, as much as we can understand it from here, and then
mhm.
living from that place. What could be better than
He
that?
I love how you just said that. Was so beautiful. Oh, and I love that this is recorded because you need to hear what you just said. It was beautiful.
I'll play it
But
back.
he's also one of the kindest, sweetest. So he taught me kindness.
Mm,
I don't want to even say how many things I pay forward, because people that know what they know that, because I just literally just take things off and just pay that forward. Or if there's I had this little boy yesterday. I mean, if I'm just, when somebody needs something, that's what he was. So when I read that he went to the bank and he slipped that money under the tellers, you know, because he knew that teller needed that money, and he just did those kind of things. And I do the same. I just we're call. It doesn't matter. I don't need that anymore. That person needs that. Or
mhm.
acts of kindness where you just slip something in, or you just do something really special. I mean, he taught me that. He teaches me that every day. Still in spirit, he teaches me that.
And it doesn't just benefit other people, because it connects us to this faith in abundance.
It does.
And when you're connected to the source of all that is, like, what could you ever be missing? What could ever be missing from your life when you're connected to all that is? And when we practice that, we feel it, we open to it, and more comes into our life. And all of the wealth and the abundance and the influence that came into his life, and it's just, he just recirculated it, right? Like,
Yeah.
he's sending it around, which is an enormous opportunity, but also big responsibility. And I think he
Yeah.
he modeled so many things for us, and for his family. His daughters are doing some beautiful things in the world, and um, I just love the impact that he had. And he He worked hard to get there. Like it
Yes.
wasn't handed to him. He found his way there, and he shared what he got excited about. And I know that in your own way you're doing that, and in my own way I'm doing
Yeah.
that, and so many people are, and it brings us together. If you want to find your tribe, you have to shine your light. You have to step
Mhm.
forward. And I think for me, that's been one of the biggest blessings in my life, is that when I stepped out and I was willing to kind of show up and be seen and have a voice and talk about the things that I'm passionate about, it brought people into my life like I'd never had before. So, and you're one of those people. So thank you for being here.
I feel the same way about you. Yeah, it was it's a blessing that we got to do this.
And it was
And
time. It had to be perfect timing. So here we are. Now, I know you said you have published 3 books and you're working on
yes,
another one. Tell us more about
yes.
your new book.
Well, the new book is um I was in the shower and Spirit said you're going to write another book, and I had a fight with Source and I said that's not happening. Literally. And the voice
Haven't
got
you learned
louder.
it's not worth fighting it?
It's not, you still got to kind of stick it in there, right? So I'm like, I sighed and I heard the voice, and the voice said, um, Source said to my heart. I literally hear a voice on my heart. And the voice was, you're writing an, you need, you're writing another book. And the book is called Slow Dancing with Silence.
Ooh.
And I'm, so I got the message. I got out of the shower and I actually put it on the shelf for a couple of months. And I had a client for a while. She's lovely. She's growing in spirit, and she reached out to me, and she's very shy. And she reached out to me a few months later, 2 or 3 months later, and this is normally what Source does to me. And she said to me, I'm an avid reader. I read all the time. Um, I think that I could be a really good editor. And she said, if you ever want to write another book, I'm asking if I could please edit your book. Could I do the pre-editing to your book? And I went, okay, God, I heard you. So because she's trying to grow and she needed to heal, and that spurred me to write the book. And the book was written. This book is different than the other 3 books. The other 3 books, I invited a lot of people into the books, their stories, what they do. There's a lot of things in the other books, and this book is strictly really about um, just messages that I got from Source in my experience in the chapters. So anyway, long story short, I gave it to this. I don't want to say her name because I want to keep her confidential for now. And I don't have her permission, but she took the project and here's the awesome thing about this, Nadia. Even if the book never gets published, she has healed so much from editing this book and getting what she needs to get into it and understanding it on the levels that she needs to understand it on, that it's already done what it's supposed to have done. And I mean, if it goes out there and does others for others, that's wonderful. But she's actually written the foreword to the book, and she's even taken another step further for herself and put herself right out there and written the foreword. So I can't wait to get back what she's done. And I already know that it's already done the healing it was supposed to do. So we can only hope that it's going to go on and heal whoever else picks it up.
Yeah. Yep. God
So
willing, right?
yeah, yeah,
Um, we help each other, and I think that's so important. And things happen just the way they're meant to at the time that it needs to happen. And the more that we can trust that, the more we can enjoy that journey instead of worrying about it. I'm guilty of worrying just like anybody
hmm
else. I don't
yeah,
want people to think that I'm some ascended master. I certainly am not.
yeah,
But like these things really help us when we have these moments of remembering that for example, like what you talked about, it's not about what you accomplish. It's about who you become in the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like becoming the person who could write that book, who could take it all the way through and get it published, or whatever it
Yeah.
is, for whatever, whoever's listening, whatever music is in you, whatever you feel called to do. And it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be a public thing. It can be a private thing. But whatever you feel called to do, like, if you just trust in that and know that even
Yeah.
if you don't feel ready for it now,
Yeah.
this this process is you growing and becoming. I used to say self-actualized people must be what they can be. And I've been
Hmm.
thinking about that so much recently, because sometimes I wonder, like, I'm busy enough with my life, right? Like I could simplify things, but what is it in me? What is it in me that is pushing me forward, that is calling me towards these things? And I think it's that. Like there's something in me, there's some potential, there's some path that's there, and it's
Hmm.
not about, as much as I would love it to be about who I can reach and how I can be of service. I think it's really, the secret is, it's really about who I become in the
Hmm.
process, just like you did.
I love how you said that. And I am going to say this. I think that you probably are an ascended master. So I wouldn't think that you're not.
Well, we are
So
all
I,
spiritual beings,
right?
but I am very human as well.
You are, but for you to have the degree of how you're speaking and what you're talking about, I would believe that you probably are more ascended than you may be giving yourself credit for,
Well,
because I
thank
think
you.
you're pretty awesome. I do want to say that when you take the courage to write a book, my first book was my story, and I felt naked like the emperor's daughter in it. And I was scared. My second book was more about how to do what I do. Like, if you could just choose from my cup's so full, pick something so that you can have something in your cup so that I can get some more in my cup. My third book was the most challenging. It was really, I used to have fear about everything, a lot of fear. And when I went to write this book, I was in a country by myself for 2 months that didn't speak English. English wasn't the common language there. And I was in a big house, and I literally scared to death, literally faced that dark energy, and literally, oh, after I wrote the book, I had not one ounce, I don't have any fear anymore. It's completely gone. So I encourage anybody and everybody to write, to read, to do whatever it is they need to do,
Mhm.
because there's a liberation in doing the work and going through the work. So I wrote the books because I needed to write them, but I also wrote the books because I was hoping that someone else might get a message from that to help them.
Yeah.
So that's why we do what we do, right? We help each other with that.
And it may not be easy, but life is short. And when we look back, I know there will be so many times that we'll look back in our life and we'll go, why didn't I just go for it? Or why
Hmm.
didn't I take that chance? And so we need to remind ourselves that, well, we're here, that, this is a temporary human experience, and we
Absolutely.
we are courageous souls to come here and be humans and live in all this change that's happening in the world right now. So,
Hmm.
whoever's listening, if you think that you're shy and you're afraid, I promise you, your soul isn't. Your soul is brave and courageous and ready for anything, and is just waiting for you to say yes. Just say yes. You don't have to know all the steps. You don't have to see all the way. Just take that first step and say yes, and keep saying yes every day, and you won't even believe what can happen in your life.
That was beautiful.
I just
Beautiful.
I that just came over me. I just know there's someone who's going to be listening to this who needs to hear this. So
So
you know
true.
who you are. Now,
Just say yes. Yes.
just say yes. Now, Tracy, what is the best way for people to reach you?
The best way for people to reach me is probably my email or my website. My email is probably the best way, and it's www.innerspacejourney.com. All one word, Innerspace Journey. I do get texts as well, but if it's an email is usually the best way. I do have Facebook Messenger, so I'm on Facebook. I have a couple of business. I have a business page on Facebook under Tracey Pagana.
Mhm.
You could reach me there too. You could message me there too, but I'm not so techy, so I usually either see an email or a text more than I
Mhm.
would sometimes see a messenger on my
Yeah,
Facebook page. Yeah.
for sure. Thank
Mm-hmm.
you.
You're
And
welcome.
so, as we wrap up, I want to give you an opportunity. If you had one message that you could leave with everyone today, what would you say?
I would say when you address the core of who you are and your truth, in your total truth, and you address that truth, I would say if there's anything that you need to forgive yourself, please do. Forgive yourself and give it and release it with a big breath, even one big breath, just and give it to source. This allows you the opportunity to literally fall in love with yourself. I know that when you were little, or there may be someone that had said to you, loving yourself is selfish. But truly, if you're not selfish first, you cannot be selfless for the world. If you do not know how to fall in love with you, you cannot give that love to anyone else. And so forgive yourself for whatever it is that's keeping you from falling in love with who you truly are as a human being, because you're magic. You're magic in every thought, in every action, in every word, in every sparkle of your eye. And that is who you are. You are love. You come from love. And that's what you're here to learn.
Forgiveness is freedom. So true. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. Thank you, Wayne, for bringing us together. I know that he plays a role in this for sure. For all of the love and light that you brought, I feel it so much, and I know that people listening today will feel it too. For all our listeners, thank you for following Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life and telling your friends about it. The full video for this episode will be available for my subscribers on Patreon. You can get the link for that and more details about this podcast at nadiadelacruz.com. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of each other. Namaste.